Welcome back to Wood, everyone. How are you? Good. Did everyone get some of the food truck fare today? Yes. Was it good? Yeah. Okay. We expect feedback, so let us know. All right. Test test one. Can you hear me now? Are we on? Te- Test test. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are already a little behind and need to make up some time. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today Dr. Brian Williamson, who is a partner with Giant Worldwide and is sought after by leaders of all levels, traveling nationally and internationally, consulting and communicating in a way that contributes to the increased health and performance of teams. He has a proven track record of helping individuals and teams increase their leadership skills, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness, resulting in a greater capacity, satisfaction, and effectiveness. He has 20 plus years of leadership experience, including roles as a founder, a senior director, as well as 4 years active duty as a U.S. Marine. His unique research in the field of positive organizational scholarship will be released next year in his book, Norm Defying Leadership, Science and Stories from Today's Top Performers. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the Wood stage, Dr. Williamson.
Thanks very much. I've been wanting to thank you for so long. When I was stationed in Okinawa, we used to hop on our bikes and drive over to Kadena, and it was the first time I had Popeye's chicken. So red beans and rice. I grew up in New Jersey, never had that southern fare. So thank you not only for flying us, but for the luxuries of Kadena. So I really appreciate you. All right, so my intention during our time is that three things get accomplished here. One, I'm going to introduce you briefly to the field of positive organizational scholarship. There's a lot to be gleaned there. Second, I'm going to inspire you with an overview of my research findings. And third, I'm going to challenge you to grapple with personal and contextual applications for you. All right, so let me introduce you a little bit to the field of positive organizational scholarship. A friend and I my business partner, were actually recently hired by a company to look at what are the factors impacting attrition in the 2-year and under population. So why is it that people that were there 2 years and under are taking off and saying peace out so quickly? And so you might not be surprised to find out that actually, like the research says, about 70% of the workforce is disengaged and 51% of the management workforce is disengaged. And so we hypothesized that it was the supervisor-employee relationship that was contributing to this 2-year and under leak. And sure enough, that was the case. And so we did an extensive research write-up, and I sat last month with 5 of the supervisors, and I handed them the results. And I had them read through the page after page, the line after indicting line, really saying this, that they had very, very low relational management skills, very low emotional intelligence. The employees were complaining about very, very simple things. They were complaining about just a lack of common courtesy, a lack of respect, inability to access their supervisor during the whole 12-hour shift that they were present. And so I framed my first question very, very carefully, and I said to them, imagine if this was a report about managers in another location. I said, imagine this isn't about you at all. I said, what do you see here? What is it that you would coach? What would you say to the people receiving this report? And the guy that was the first responder jumped in, and this is what he said. He said, Brian, I think that the results would be the same no matter where you went. I think if you gave this survey in any workplace, it would be the same. And so I said to him, using my mad active listening skills, which are very intentional, not natural to me, I said, okay, so it sounds like what you're saying is that a healthy, thriving workplace culture doesn't exist. And he said, it does, but it is the exception. Now, I don't even fish. I'm from Jersey. And that's what you call hook, line, and sinker. And I locked eyes with him, and I pulled him in, and I said this. I said, why don't you, over the next year, commit with me to becoming the exception? Why don't you commit to actually breaking free from this transactional mindset that keeps you locked in compliance and low morale and all the things that you're experiencing, and take a look with me at life from the right end of the bell curve. Why don't you look at life with me from the positive deviance end of the bell curve? So I just put two words together that you're not used to hearing. Positive deviance. It's sort of like giant ant, or Microsoft Works, or partial ceasefire. Okay, they're words that you don't actually hear together quite a bit. But this is what we study inside of the field of positive organizational scholarship. We look at what is it that enables exceptional, outlier, positively deviant performance. We look at what causes flourishing, what's life-giving inside organizations and teams. And it's ironic for me that I chose this as a field of study, because I'm sort of the last, I'm very critical, I'm the least likely to be like shiny, happy people holding hands kind of person. But I actually found that we're talking about positive in terms of exceptional performance, and we're talking about positive in terms of what does it take to see people flourish and thrive and not just live status quo. Another way to think about this is this is a couple of our little friends here. Okay, I live in Lansing, Michigan, wife, 4 kids. My wife has this really bad habit of 3 times a year, we get dressed up and we go to JCPenney and we're all in the same pajamas. I do the walk of shame, and we got all our family looking like, you know, this tribe of crazy pajama people. And we added the dogs to the mix, and she's gone plumb mad, okay? So Louie and Lilo, I mean, you put an M60 in my hands, I'm a devil dog, but you put a pug in my lap and I'm all different, right? So she gets Louie and Lilo, and here's what happens. She has Facebooked away tons of these pictures. And like last week, somebody said to us, how in the world do you get your dogs to stay so still? Now, I was like, really? Somebody's gonna ask that question? It's called a treat, you know? Sit, Lilo, sit, Louie, and stay, right? And then it dawned on me, what we do inside positive organizational scholarship, and here's why we do it, is there's so much research about what we call deficit gaps. There's so much research about things that are going bad or things that are wrong. In fact, some people think as much as 99% of psychological research, as high as 90% of health research is about the negative side of the continuum. There's an illness, there's something wrong, let's get it to health, right? So it's that side of the continuum. Very little has been done on what's the right side of what we call an abundance gap. What causes these exceptional behaviors? You can see a list here in different categories, right? What is it that really is that, not just a bad dog, let me hit you with a switch, or a good dog, have a treat, but what is it to do the exceptional outlier type behaviors? And looking at deviance along a continuum like this really frames up what we're after here. So we have no issue with looking at the negative and the challenges, but we want to be expansive and not limiting in what we're looking at. So why we want to look at this is actually, I'm going to tell you 2 things. First of all, listen carefully. If you lick the lollipop of mediocrity, you'll suck forever. It's profound. That's tweetable right there. Now, really simply, like, who doesn't want to go to the right of the bell curve, right? Who doesn't want to perform exceptionally? And there's a whole field of 20+ years of research that says, hey, if you want to increase things like mental acuity, innovation, satisfaction, you know, it's taking a look at that side of the curve. So we want to be exceptional. It actually unleashes something called the heliotropic effect when we look at life from the right side of the bell curve. And that is, if you put a plant in a window, it gravitates toward the light. And this is why positive energy is so powerful, and looking at life from the right of the bell curve is so important. And second, I know there's a lot of talk about the VUCA world. I'm probably a little bit more concerned with the TGIF world, which is Twitter, Google, iPhone, Facebook, right? Right? Technology has sped up so much, and one thing in our world that actually hasn't sped up, there's been massive, right, technological advances. If you think even in pharma, it used to take about 10 years to reproduce a medicine that came out on the market. Now it takes like an hour, right? So much has changed. But what hasn't changed is the time that it takes for a team to become a high-performing team. And so anything we can look at when we think about that right of the bell curve to learn from outlier leaders, what is it that they do so well in terms of the people side is really, really important. So now I want to share with you some of my research findings and tell you a little bit about what I did, the work I did, and how I think it can benefit you. So when I was in 5th grade, I got this guy here. Anybody remember Stretch Armstrong? This will be another way to tell the millennials and the centennials, right? Okay, I got Stretch Armstrong. This guy was the cat's pajamas. I love this thing. Well, he lasted about 2 months in my house. Because what happened, some of you did this, didn't you? I took an X-Acto knife and I slayed him, sliced him right down the middle, right? And out of the middle of Stretch Armstrong, I have 0 regrets, out of the middle came this red corn syrup liquid stuff, and it was incredible, right? And I love that. I love the idea of, let me gut something. Like, I guess, even though I didn't hunt growing up, and maybe that was the issue until I was in the Marine Corps, no. But I wanted to gut something and see it pop out. So here's the thing. When I decided to pick my research, I wanted to gut positively deviant leaders. What is the inside story in leaders that allows them to go above and beyond normal performance? So the definition of positive deviance when we talk about leadership is this. It's uncommon behavior that does not conform to expected norms, but it would actually be deemed positive by a referent group of followers. So what I did was I looked at a group of these leaders. Now, what's really interesting about this is I didn't just look at leaders, because actually there was some research done about 20,000 plus executives, and what they found was that 70% of them thought they were in the top 10%, right? Hashtag blind spots, right? So what I wanted to find out was also what did the followers perceive in these particular leaders that caused them to be these amazing positively deviant leaders. Let me give you a quick rundown of these leaders. So I interviewed 2 presidents. One of them was recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing privately held companies. They've grown by 133% consistently over the last 3 years. Absolutely incredible performance. One was the president of a $4 billion manufacturing company who, when I shared this topic with one of his senior leaders, they said, that is totally him. He's a positive rule breaker. He's a norm-defying leader. One was a serial entrepreneur. One was an Air Force general, and I think you'll resonate with some of what I share there. In addition to a myriad of other things, he told me the story of how he sort of flexed some airspace rules and some refueling regulations to save 12 Marines in the Kunar Valley. And amazing just to tap his heart and really gut him and see what were the things that, from his vantage point, enabled this exceptional performance. I looked at a restaurant owner. Now, this was fascinating. I saw a story on CNN News, and it caught my attention. And right away, I thought, this is absolutely a positively deviant leader. Her profits are 4 times higher than other successful restaurants in San Francisco. Her dishwasher, Miguel, has been there for 26 years. And she's got this really interesting statement on her menu. They've since taken it off and just included it into the cost of other items. But if you read this little snippet here, it says the $1.25 per person surcharge added to all checks provides full benefits for our hard-working staff. The extra charge provides 32 employees of the San Francisco French Bistro with full health and dental insurance and paid sick leave. No employee is exempt, even those who work only 1 day a week. It was really amazing. And as I listened to her, her name was Jen, I listened to her talk, and she would tell me about going to the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, and she would tell her story about how it was that she was getting these exceptional results. And it rocks my mind. But guess what? People wouldn't do it, right? She's this outlier restaurant with amazing retention that'll rock your mind. I mean, again, you got a waiting list to get in there, right? The way she takes care of her people, we're going to see some of it in just a minute. People wouldn't do it. They were locked in their conventional mindset. So let me give you a little bit of an initial snapshot of when I asked the followers of these leaders. First I asked them, I said, do you think your leader is a positively deviant leader? And they all said yes. And I said, well, why is that the case? What is it that stands out to you about these particular leaders? And so here's what they said. I'm going to read through just a few of the notes here. The first one said this: it was the ability to let you lead. A lot of leaders in those positions try to micromanage and don't allow for failure in different aspects. And to be able to speak into that, the challenge that what you did yesterday isn't good enough for today either. The expectation that you have to build into other leaders and you don't get to just sit and soak it all up. You have to push it into others. So I don't think that's a typical approach by leaders in the world. Here's the next one. One of the best things about Jason is he does have a different way of thinking about things that goes outside the norm. I have seen in him, it's almost like a generosity for customers, or even if, let's say, the customer is not paying the bills and contractually we have the right to go back and not pay for the repair on a piece of equipment, we would still go make the repair for them and would risk losing a significant amount of money in the hopes that this is a sign we can rebuild the relationship and have it long term. Here's the next one. To start with, probably she from the beginning has really focused on putting the team aspect above most things. So she centered around the team to build a strong team that would then care for her patients rather than put the patients first. So it's kind of like a backwards way of putting patients first. So put us first, strengthen us so that we can better care for her patients so that it doesn't just, not just a top-down model, and she doesn't get to make all the decisions. She builds us up and strengthens us up to help make decisions. And here's the next follower of the same particular person. Well, the first thing I'd say is that she's not top-down. She does not have a top-down management style. Her management style is more of a shared leadership style. And you don't see that in a lot of organizations. She doesn't like to call herself boss. She kind of hates that word, and she has like a shared leadership amongst her practice. So I really think that sets her apart and pushes her above. So let me just say one thing, just about those initial follower descriptions. You remember the 80s song, I Always Feel Like Somebody's Watching Me? Remember that? Don't make me sing it. All right. Thank you. It was really fascinating to me listening to the followers of these leaders, because they could describe with great accuracy, very, very similar to General Quast's first principle there, almost to a scary amount of detail, the attitudes, the behaviors, these things about their leader. I mean, they are very, very tuned in. Those in your charge are very tuned into how you're living. And so I like to ask people, what's it like to be on the other side of you? How do people experience you? And getting that type of information is incredibly valuable for you. So as I gutted these leaders, we're going to look at 3 different areas. We're going to look at values, behaviors, and attitudes. So what were the motivators of this positively deviant behaviors in leaders, positively deviant leadership? When we gutted them, what did we find? So the first area we're going to look at is values, okay? And here's a simple list. These are simply the values from the leader perspective and the values from the follower perspective. So first of all, prioritization and care for others was the dominant, weightiest factor that we found. This will definitely feel like we are beating a dead horse in this conference if I spend time talking to you about this, right? Others first. People, when they meet you, are saying, are you for me, against me, or for yourself? Positively deviant leaders, these norm-defying leaders, were for others. They were marked by fighting for the highest possible good in the lives of those they led. They were values-driven. One of them said this: when values are clear, decisions are easy. Isn't that good? So some of you that struggle with indecisiveness, I'm a person, I love to keep my options open and let it hang for a real while. And actually, it dawned on me that values are a way to expedite decisions when you're working in a team, isn't it? And so this idea that values were very, very protective and guarding for these particular leaders was important both from the leader and the follower perspective. They had a growth and reproduction mindset. We're going to talk in more detail in just a minute about that. But they were continual learners, and they really had this desire to push things down, not only to the person in front of them, but to the 3rd and 4th generation right out of the gate. I thought that was fascinating, that they weren't even just thinking about who is this person in front of me and how can I develop them. They were thinking, how can I help this person develop the person that's underneath them? Really powerful. They had a sense of meaning, whether this was religious faith or yoga or early life experiences like General Quast talked about earlier as well. Those things really marked these particular leaders. All of them had a sense of calling about what they were doing. There were things in their lives that marked them that they could anchor back to, and they were anchoring to a greater purpose. They were marked by courageous action. All of them ran toward conflict. It was actually interesting. Some of them would say, boy, it's really energizing for me to run towards conflict. And others of them would say, boy, I feel really vulnerable, but I still run towards conflict, right? That was a mark of a value of this particular leaders. They had a shared approach to leadership, very obvious. They were actually very collaborative and pushing things down. And this last one I want to comment on. So from the leader's perspective, they saw that one of the keys to their effectiveness was their own emotional intelligence. And there's a lot of research on emotional intelligence. We won't spend a lot of time there, but it certainly was something that they actually understanding their own emotional state, knowing how to connect with the people in front of them, understanding different personalities was very important for the leader as a driver of their behavior. Now, from the follower perspective, they called out integrity in these leaders. And I thought it was actually really important to notice that the leader didn't actually say that integrity was a value. Now notice, I didn't say that they didn't value integrity, but they actually didn't themselves say that that was a value. And I got to thinking about this a little bit, and it reminded me of a gentleman when I took a senior director role. My first week on the job, a guy pulled me aside, and he gave me the arm around the shoulder, and he said, "Hey, Brian, if you ever need somebody to talk to, you can talk to me," right? And for me, it was like, run, Forrest, run, right? The person that has to come up to me and say, "Hey, you can trust me, I'm a person you can trust," is like, probably not. Like my little Quast meter was going off in terms of my discernment. It was like epic fail down there, right? So it's probably best to demonstrate integrity and not declare integrity, right? I thought it was actually interesting there from the perspective of the leaders. So those are values. What about behaviors? How did these leaders behave? Okay? Now, this is actually maybe not going to shock you, but the lists look very similar, right? And so that prioritization and care of others that they said they valued played out in a connection and care for other people, right? Now, I'll talk about that in a second. You go down the list, I won't spend a lot of time. They said growth and reproduction mindset. That played out in how they behaved in terms of the way they interacted with people. From the follower's perspective, commenting on the behavior of the leader, the follower said, that leader is learning all the time. There's always some fresh popcorn spewing out of their head about something that they're learning, about something that's actually intriguing them, right? So from the follower perspective, they noticed that growth orientation of the leader. Emotional intelligence plays out here on both sides. So in the behaviors of the leader, the followers said, boy, they really understand how to connect with me well. They understand what motivates me, what's important to me, and they could do that well. The leaders credited creativity a ton, and we'll go into detail in a minute. And the followers actually called out communication and modeling of vision. So let me hit pause now and make a few comments just on the values and behaviors categories of these particular leaders. First of all, there are practiced values and preferred values, right? So there are things that we say that we value. So we might say, I value physical fitness, and if I don't go to the gym in a month, I probably prefer to it's a preferred value. I mean, I would like to do that aspirationally, but I'm not practicing that, right? So positively deviant, norm-defying leaders were very consistent in the values and the behavior sets that were playing out. They were practicing what they preached. They lived integrated lives. There was a congruence between what the leader said he or she valued and what they did. Now, again, for average and low performers, I mean, this is a little bit of a 360 that I did here, right? So I look at average leaders and low-performing leaders. What they say they value and how they behave are not always the same, right? There can be a distinction there. So they actually lived that out. Secondly, when you saw that they valued the prioritization and care of their followers, they actually behaved in a way where they spent time connecting with their people. Now, I fully understand. It used to be that the Harley Davidson was the kind of the American dream, like get out on the highway, do that whole Harley thing. And now somebody said it's sort of like the tire spin is our mantra. It's like life at the speed of blur. So actually taking the time to slow down, to be present with people and give them what's necessary for their development, which is proximity and frequency, it's a gift. And it's a very important gift that these leaders gave to their people. They made sure that they were in proximity and had frequency of connection with their followers. I mean, real simple stuff. I think I thought I had that up there. Real simple things. I'll read real quick here. So one of the ladies said this, the leader. She said, when I arrive to work, I never go straight to the office. I come in, I say hello to everybody individually. I ask about their kids. I ask about their brothers. I know each of them by name, what their life situations are, and if someone's home sick, I'll text them and check on them. I've sent flowers to my employees. If they've been in the hospital, if they've had new kids, I get them gifts. So she said, I just sort of had an awareness of them as people, not just employees. And so what does it look like for you as you launch into 2018 to actually go, how can I provide proximity and frequency to my followers in a transformational way? Finally, here's my last thought just on the whole values and behaviors categories. Talking about vision from a stage is overrated. I thought it was really interesting that the leaders didn't credit their visionary capacity as something that was a key marker of their that set them apart for these norm-defying behaviors. The followers did. The followers said, you know what? The way the leader casts vision is really powerful. Now, the way that the leader did it was in two main ways, and this is what the followers said. Number one, they said that the leader lives the vision, that they actually embody the things that they want to call us up to be. And secondly, it was baked into the day in and day out conversations of their lives, right? So it wasn't the sage on the stage, right? It was actually the way they lived the vision and the way they baked it into the day-to-day aspects of their lives. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the values in more detail. So first of all, I want to talk to you about, just for a minute, about the prioritization and care for followers element. And again, it could be the one where you beat the dead horse, where you feel like, here we go again with putting others first. But here's the thing. There was a guy, his name is Subir Chowdhury. He's written a lot in Six Sigma, and he does a lot of consulting on quality and process improvement. And what he did was he started to notice the way that some of his clients would take his insights and they would get a five times return on their investment from what he did. And that's okay. That's a fair return. But other of his clients would get 100x return on their investment. And so he said, well, clearly, maybe it's that the consultants that he was discharging into these different locations were, one was he just licked the lollipop of mediocrity, and the other one was good. And they actually did the in-depth research, and what they found out was the caring mindset was the differentiator. It was actually that capacity for the people to feel cared for that really marked them. So I want you to listen to some of the ways that these positively deviant leaders talked about that value of caring for others. Here's what the Air Force General said. He said, it starts with the value of humanity, the value of other people. This value in the journey of humanity to find mutual respect and carve out the ability to love one another. That's probably the value that's most deeply motivational to me. For me, this is the empathy that really makes a difference to a person who contributes to their tapestry of relationships. Here's what the president said. This is the president of, again, one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the country. He said, first and foremost is a love for people, right? This is a much different mindset than, if you were in the session on millennials earlier, than work 2.0, right? Than that kind of boss command control leader. He says, I bring into my desire as a leader to show love to the people that I have received in my life. figuring out what it looks like for us as an organization to love and see the best in each other as people, and yet use that as a driving force to have a more successful organization where we hold each other to a higher accountability. That's been something I've had to work through along with other leaders here in the organization who reflect that same passion for seeing people who have inherent value. I'm going to go on to some of the follower perspectives. Okay, so the follower said this: I think his integrity is way above board. I think his care for people is beyond what others do. He actually does care about you. It's an interesting phrase. Next, he values other people. He values how people are feeling, and he values people with their careers. I think he looks at employees not necessarily as they're going to be here the rest of their life. I think it's more of, what can I do to help you with your career so that someday, if you do leave, you can take that and, make something better of it. So let me talk to you about a few practices about prioritizing and connecting with your followers. First of all, be interested before interesting. This is so simple. Paying attention to the people in front of you, unlocking them, finding out what matters to them will help you go further in your influence as a leader than I think so many things. Be interested before interesting. Number 2, call people up more than you call people out. This one's so fun. I've got 4 kids, so there's always crazy mayhem going on in our house. And I've brought this language into our family. So it was my 14-year-old. We were at the dinner table last week, and he's like, all right, I want to start calling people up in our family rather than calling people out. And he starts going around the table and calling people up. I'm like, boom, that's sweet, right? You want to call people up to what they can be instead of calling them out into what they're not. Such a simple practice. And so maybe you start in 2018. I'm going to do some call up times. I'm going to call people up on the team rather than calling people out. And number 3, level the ground, right? In every one of these leaders, there was a pushing down of authority to where information was. There was a pushing down of authority in a almost promiscuously generous way. How do I get this authority downward so that other people have the maximum engagement? So I'm going to talk to you for a minute about the second thing I want to focus on, which is this growth and reproduction mindset value. I'm going to talk for a minute on that. So these leaders had a desire to push things downward, not only to the person in front of them, but to the person that was going to be impacted there. And the place where that actually was birthed was in this place of actually going, how do I have a mindset of multiplication? How do I think? I always tell people system stands for anything that saves you stress, time, energy, and money, right? How do I have a systems mindset that allows me to cascade values and cascade practices beyond myself? So this idea of actually learning, and this idea of actually going, how can I be a person who has something to pass on to others was really important. The Air Force general said this. He said, I have a behavior where I read. Even though I'm not a natural reader, I read a lot, and I read a wide variety, from theologists, sociologists, behavioral scientists, biologists, astrophysicists, futurists, business, military, and I do it because it brings creativity, it brings courage, right? So this learning mindset led to creativity, which led to this spilling out, which led to this constant pushing downward in really unique ways into the lives of their people. Finally, in the last minute, I want to talk to you about the attitudes. What did we see in the attitudes of these leaders that stood out from that normal or negatively deviant leadership model? So from the leader's perspective, they had a positive attitude, right? Shocking. Even if they were very critical, one of the leaders said, I suffer from terminal positivity. I'm always thinking optimistically. I'm always picturing what's the preferred future that actually can be something that I can compel others into. They were marked by humility and an abundance mindset, that resources could be scarce, but resources can also be created. And the same thing again from the followers. They saw positivity, they saw humility, and they saw visionary leadership evidenced in the leader. They saw a courageous mindset, and they saw a graciousness in the leader. I want to give you one final thought, and I want to focus on positivity and positive energy. So it's really interesting that the affect when you have positive energy as a leader onto your followers. And there was research done on networks inside organizations. And if you think about three kinds of networks, an information network, an influence network, and an energy network. An information network is a network that says who gives information to whom, right? This would be, I've got some IT knowledge and I become at the hub of an information network. An influence network is who influences whom. Who has some type of influence, however that happens. That's an influence network. If I was on staff at the Harvard Business Review, I would be at the hub of an influence network, and probably people would listen to me just because I was in this influence hub. And an energy network is about who energizes whom and who is energized by whom. What the research says is this: if you are in an energy network, a positively energizing energy network, first of all, you're going to be a higher performer. In fact, your position in the energy network is 4 times the predictor of performance compared to an influence or information network. And high-performing organizations had 3 times more positive energy networks than low-performing organizations. So I think if I were to say one thing as we land our time is, what does it look like if you think about positive, negative, neutral, when you're making contributions to people around you, to cultivate a mindset that says, I'm going to be a life-giving leader, not just a neutral leader, but I'm going to find ways to actually call people up rather than call people out and be someone who actually applies this into my own space. So top performers spend 1 hour more per week on average reflecting on who they're becoming. So as we land our time, I think that'll be my final thought, is just to say this, is that as you head into 2018, make sure you carve out space to reflect on how you're practicing with consistency these kind of values, behaviors, and attitudes that'll help you achieve extraordinary results. Thanks for your time. I still try to end someone on